Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Bearcast here on Sick'em365.com, 365 Sports. I'm Craig Smoak, joined as always by Grayson Grundhoefer of Sick'em365.com as well. And we are here with you remotely this week as we get geared up like everybody else for the Christmas holidays and kind of getting all of our ducks in a row before taking a little bit of a break here for the next couple of weeks, but plenty to get to over the course of the next hour. And glad for you to be with us, whether live or after the fact. I'm joined as always by Grayson Grundhoefer, Director of Broadcasting, as I mentioned there at the top. Garrett Ross, also behind the scenes. But Grayson, I know we've had some news come down here in the last 30 seconds or so, I guess, with another commitment now in the books, and we'll get to all of that. But how you doing this week, man?
I'm doing great, and I know Garrett was probably freaking out. I'm like barely getting in here right before the show starts, but obviously some big news for Baylor, and it's just been it's been a nice little whirlwind. I mean, there hasn't been a ton of commits compared to other programs, but I think that's going to start changing probably over the course of the next week. And this is a really fun time. It's also just a very busy time, right, for me. So it's a eventful one and something that I really look forward to because with the transfer portal, you can actually see teams, make big pushes to being exponentially better year to year. And so you're kind of watching Baylor try to build on what they had from a year ago, try to get better in some ways. And I think we're kind of seeing the effects of that right now.
Yes, we are. They just picked up another commit today, as we mentioned. So pulling up the information on all of that, and we'll get to that along with a couple of other commits that Baylor has gotten thus far as the transfer portal has opened up. And on the other side of that, they've had a lot of guys, especially these last few days, seems like that have jumped in the portal. It looked like it was just a couple guys, and now it's up to like almost 10 players, kind of out of nowhere almost. But what do you think is, before we get into all the details and start talking about this bowl game and whatnot, sort of been the theme of this early signing period so far for Baylor?
Right. So I mean, during this portal period, it's kind of one of those things where Baylor clearly is trying to bring in guys who fit specific needs on the roster, and really they've been pretty patient, I think, compared to other teams around the country. I know a lot of people have pointed to what Texas Tech has done. They've brought in a lot of guys early on in the process, whereas Baylor's been a little more patient. So I think the theme is just finding specific positions, addressing them, and then going out and getting those guys on campus and then trying to land them. As far as the actual roster and guys who are leaving, I think it's some of the names that we kind of felt like were going to leave. I would say there's maybe two names that were kind of right on the fence as to whether Baylor would I guess like to lose them or not. But I think in general they haven't lost anyone that was going to start for them next season, which I think there was a lot of speculation in the middle of the season that they could lose some big pieces. And I think a lot of people were trying to run with that speculation, but that hasn't happened. Baylor's done a great job solidifying the roster and then trying to build around it.
So we will get into the big bowl game, Texas Bowl with LSU, but let's get into the details of what's gone down here over this early signing period. And I guess we might as well just start there, right? Since that's the big breaking news, and we'll go, I guess, work our way somewhat backwards and start with what's fresh and what's happened here in the last 5 minutes, I guess, really 10 minutes at most. But here in the last few minutes, as we were about to join you live, Alabama wide receiver Kobe Prentice has committed to Baylor this morning. 5'10", 182-pound prospect, 60 catches, 780 yards, 5 TDs over 3 years at Bama, per the write-up over on Sick'em365.com. Also, some more detailed info there on what he did his first couple of years and his former recruiting ranking, which was being a top 100 prospect back in 2022. So Grayson, as you point out in the article, they lose a lot from the wide receiver room, and they had that at the top of their priority list. So they get Kobe Prentice from formerly Alabama in the fold here. And what are your reaction, or what's your immediate reaction? What are your thoughts on what this means? And just overall kind of get the ball rolling here and talking about what they've done so far.
So he was one of those guys who was kind of a surprise visitor to a lot of people. And this is the kind of prospect that I feel like some people are very biased towards Baylor landing, guys who were at big time programs and big time recruits, landing those type of guys, as opposed to, some people argue, oh, you want just productive guys, right? That's kind of been the argument early on in the transfer portal process over the past few years. But he fits that bill, right? He went to Alabama, was I think he was like a top 80 guy in his 2022 class, obviously top 100. Him coming to Baylor is going to make him one of Baylor's all-time recruits as far as a high school talent that they've ever landed. And so that is obviously very intriguing. Then you throw in the fact that he goes to Bama. His first 2 years, he was productive. He had over 300 receiving yards each of those first 2 years. And then last year, Kalen DeBoer comes in. He dealt with a few nagging injuries. I think DeBoer favored, a guy who was on his Washington roster a year ago. And then, of course, Ryan Williams, who's an exceptional talent. And so Kobe kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit. But I think he's a very talented player. I think he fits what they're looking for in the slot. He's got a little bit of size to him at 5'10", but really good after the catch. The yards after the catch are a big area where I think he's going to provide an immediate impact. Also, I think in general, a really talented football player who's been underutilized so far during his career.
So there you go. A little breaking news to start off this week's edition of the Bearcast is Alabama wide receiver Kobe Prentice commits to Baylor. So that gives them their third transfer portal edition so far. And this will be a running list here over these next few weeks, but it's fun to see this kind of all coming together. We'll run down some of the departures as well, but let's go ahead and just unpack the edition. Kobe Prentice here. Also in these last few days, Grayson, Matthew Fobs-White of Tulane, edge rusher, 6'3", 230 pounds with a couple of years left to play. He also committed to Baylor. So you talk about addressing needs right here off the top. You knew wide receiver was going to be at the top of that, and you knew edge rusher is really going to be on the top of that list for like every team in America. It's one of the most coveted positions out there. But going and getting Matthew Fobs-White from a very good Tulane program, finished runner-up in the American Athletic Conference. Your thoughts on trying to refill this D-line?
So the biggest thing when you look at Matthew Fobs-White, obviously an edge prospect, which fits the mold that Baylor is looking for. They really needed edge guys because you're losing Steve Linton and Garmin Randolph. You also lost Jaquez Evans to the transfer portal. So Matthew Fobs-White comes in. And so kind of how I see him kind of fitting in is he's a really good pass rusher. Per PFF, his grade was 91.2 as a pass rusher. He had 4 sacks last year. He's going to be really good in that area. The question with him is, how's he going to be in the other areas? Run stopping and things like that. For that reason, I think they'll probably add another edge guy. But as far as what you're looking for is a guy who can drop into coverage and a guy who can get after the quarterback, I mean, Matthew Fobs-White really fits that very well. He also played at Tulane, which, as far as group of 5 programs go, I have a lot of respect for Tulane. And I think that's a program that's really good. They play good competition. So you can clearly see kind of how he translates to this, Power 4 level. I think he's going to be a really impactful player. And the cool story about him is he actually took an official visit to Baylor during his initial recruitment. He ended up rolling with Tulane. That's where he ended up. I think there was, potentially some moving on there from Baylor at that time. But this time around, definitely not. He ends up at the place that he's supposed to be at. And truthfully, I think he fills a big hole in the Baylor defense. So now you got him, you got Kamarian Morgan, you got, 2 guys who have been around for a while, and Kyler Jordan and Corey Kelly. Now I expect maybe they'll go out and try to add one more guy who's more of kind of an all-around guy to fill in for what they're missing with Garmin Randolph.
So Matthew Fobs-White joins the fray as well and gives you a coveted edge rusher. And I said, D-line, but yeah, obviously a guy who is in that mixture of a linebacker, a pass rusher, the edge position, as we so commonly refer to it and talk about it these days. So wide receiver, a need, and you've checked that box this morning. Edge rusher, a need, and you checked that box in the last few days. But they have a lot of needs like most teams out there. And so keeping that going, Grayson looking at more additions, and they have really been quick to keep addressing these on the D line. You're going to have to probably help me out here with the pronunciation, but Samu Taumanoepeau from Humble Atascocita, formerly of Texas A&M, a former three-star prospect on the defensive line and a redshirt freshman. So kind of a common theme here is getting more than 1 year out of some of the guys they've added so far, and that will be the case here. But big addition on defense with Taumanoepeau, and again, correct me how to say that properly, but looks like a guy with some size, which they could certainly use. They need help on the D-line, as we've already pointed out, and he's the guy to kind of get the ball rolling here for this 2025 portal class.
You did a great job with the translation there. You said it perfect. So I think for Samu, the biggest thing is I'm kind of, when Baylor opened kind of this portal process, a big part of it was, how are they going to address the nose tackle position? Last year, they went out, got a Linus Noel from Texas Southern, and he filled in well. And so he played well, I felt like, this year, especially towards the back half of the season. You still had Cooper Lands playing a lot of nose tackle, but this year, it felt like they really need to find more answers there and potentially more long-term answers. And Samu's got multiple years of eligibility remaining. He's a guy who, he's going to come in at 6'3", 350. And while he hasn't played much at A&M, a big part of that was just because of the change in the defensive scheme. It's actually very similar to what happened to Apu at LSU. There wasn't this need for a massive nose tackle prospect. And so now I think for Baylor, he fits perfect. Because this is what Dave Aranda wants. This is what the defensive line wants. They want to have a big body in the middle that just eats up double teams and forces opposing offenses to have to block him with multiple guys, and a guy that just doesn't get moved. He's an anchor in the middle. And so Samu is perfect for that. He's honestly, since the moment that Apu left, they've kind of had a revolving door at nose tackle. And now I think they have this position solidified for a few years. And that's just it. I can't, of the guys that they've landed so far, this is the most important one. And this is the one that I do think long-term fits a need, but I also think going into next year immediately, I think it fits a need as well. And so I think he's going to be a heck of a player. This was a massive get for Baylor to get him on campus immediately, get him committed. He knew exactly where he wanted to go. Baylor knew they needed to get him. They did. And he was, for them to get their first guy to be a nose tackle prospect of this kind of build and this kind of, stature is huge. And just, kind of the guy who he is. He had Miami, Oregon, TCU, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, Colorado, Kansas, and Houston all out of high school. Big time prospect, fills an immediate need, and has 3 years of eligibility.
So there you go, a rundown right off the top and a brand new commit to talk about here on the Bearcast this week as we get ready to head into holiday season. 3 commits so far in the transfer portal, with Kobe Prentice being the latest one, wide receiver from Alabama. Got Tulane edge rusher Matthew Fobs-White, and also Texas A&M nose tackle Samu Taumanoepeau. So the Bears off to a nice start with 3 big-time players, relatively regionally close to home, and pretty close to home there with Taumanoepeau coming over from College Station. But, kind of sticking in the region with these first 3 guys. And it looks like Prentice, the only one that'll be like a 1-year guy based off these first 2, the other 2 at least with 2 years left to play.
Right. So, Kobe Prentice will be a 1-year guy. Samu's got 3 years, and Matthew Fobs-White has 2 years. So there's some value placed on some of these guys that have multiple years. But then on the flip side, you also need your guys who you're just thinking, okay, you're just going to come in immediately and give us a spark for 1 season.
Yeah. So there you go with that. There's 3 players, and there will be many, many more by the time it's all said and done. But so far, so good as far as bringing some players into the fold for this 2025 portal class. On the flip side, you're also losing some players as the guys figure out that maybe the grass is greener on the other side, or maybe a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's better if you go ahead and start to dip into the portal, and it's just the way that it works. You bring in guys, you lose guys, sometimes by choice, sometimes by their choice. But either way, we've had some new additions to the outgoing part of the transfer portal since we last talked as well, Grayson. And I don't want to repeat guys. I know that we talked about a couple of them last week. I think we talked about Carmelo Jones. I think we talked about Kyan Roberts-Day and Alvin Abasale as well. I think those were the only three at that time. But there's been about a handful of guys since then, including one that we had long speculated on and talked about, and now it's official that he's back in the transfer portal. I guess got his medical news and is able to go out there and try to find his next destination. That's quarterback DeQuan Finn. Broke late last week, and we talked about it. I mean, when he was not playing and he seemingly wasn't even available, he came in and like ran for a touchdown. What was it, late in the Tech game? I think maybe it was, and then we never saw him again. And I started to wonder, gee, seems like maybe I mean clearly he was hurt. There was some injury involved, but also like, I wonder if he's going to try to squeak out another year, and he apparently has. So DeQuan Finn's in the transfer portal. This wasn't shocking. Like either way, he wasn't going to be back next year. It didn't work out in terms of Sawyer Robertson took the job when he got hurt and never relinquished it. So Finn having a year to play somewhere else, no surprise that he's going to go seek out somewhere else to play.
Correct. No surprise at all to us who have been covering this. I mean, he was not going to be the quarterback for Baylor next year, so it made sense that either he was moving on to, some sort of pro career, or he was going to try to transfer to another school. It felt like the fact that he sat out so long late in the season that it kind of made sense that he might seek a medical waiver to play one more season. I hope he gets it. I think it'd be fun to watch him play one more year of college football. But tough, looking back, it's a tough year, right? For us to look back on, kind of all the hype when Baylor landed him, and then he just didn't live up to the hype, got injured early on. The offense had struggles early on. And then Sawyer Robertson comes in and just plays awesome, throughout the entire season, especially the back half of the year. So, yeah, it's tough to see, but it happens. That's what the transfer portal can bring. You can have highly impactful guys who drastically shift your team, and then you can have guys who just don't work out.
Yeah, so DeQuan Finn is in the transfer portal officially, but not a total surprise there if you've been listening to this podcast and just kind of a general discussion surrounding him and his potential future. Knew it was either going to play in the pros or attempt to, or end up somewhere else, and so that's what's going to be the case for him. Meanwhile, others that have apparently jumped in the portal here, I mentioned we talked about Carmelo Jones and Kyan Roberts-Day. I don't remember. Did we get to Tayshawn Wilson, Grayson? Because the list I had in front of me was out of order. So Tayshawn Wilson, cornerback, also a part of the outgoing list for Baylor in the transfer portal.
Right. Yeah, we did talk about him. He was actually the first name to enter. The ones who we are missing, though, Trey Wilson and Jacquez Evans. Those are the two.
And Isaiah Dunson as well, I think, also part of that list. So, yeah, Jacques Evans, edge, came over from Western Kentucky. What got hurt and was dealing with injury, and that was basically the summary of his Baylor career, right?
Yeah, same thing as Fenn, right? He sat out the whole year, and then now it looks like he's seeking a medical to try to go play one more season somewhere else.
So that's the situation with him, and that leaves the other two. So you had Trey Wilson on the D-line, sophomore, will have a couple years left to play, and was a guy who I know a lot of people were excited about at the time that he joined the fray, but now in the transfer portal.
Right. I mean, this is just like this whole group of guys who are leaving is just one of those. It's one of those situations where it's tough to see all these guys leave, but it's also a situation where guys got hurt. Dunson got hurt and then didn't play. And so then you end up with this situation. Jacquez Evans gets hurt, doesn't play, and you end up with him entering the portal as well. Guys just kind of get passed up on the depth chart, get buried, they get injured, and this is what happens. I did want to mention really quick, Craig. Kyan Roberts-Day is committed to UTSA, so I felt like that was important. And then Alvin Abasale is committed to Houston. So we do have two updates there on where guys ended up as well. Two good landing spots for both of them.
Yeah, no doubt. And so then you mentioned Dunson as well with the injury, but good to see guys finding landing spots. And I certainly think for Kyan Roberts-Day, Jeff Traylor will be able to get the most out of him. So I think that's a nice landing spot for KRD, and good luck to him. But I'm sure Jeff Traylor was more than happy to bring in a talent like that and get the opportunity to maximize those potential talents. So, yeah, there you go. They've seen more go than they've seen come in so far. But three big pickups, including Kobe Prentice this morning. And then, yeah, you got Alvin Abasale, Tayshaun Wilson, Kyan Roberts Day, Carmelo Jones, DeQuan Finn, Jacquez Evans, Trey Wilson, Isaiah Dunson, 8 players in the portal. So 3 guys in, 8 guys out. That's 5 plus 5 or whatever. Like, how much is that in the calculation? And I mean, I know they're running the numbers and they have the numbers on hand of what they have available, but like, any surprise there as far as they have more maybe than they thought available, or is this about what they expected to have here in this first week?
I think this is about what they expected. There might be a little bit more coming, maybe as far as attrition goes. We'll see kind of how the numbers play out. Remember, numbers got shifted around a little bit to 105. So there's a lot of kind of, I don't know, discussions about how that's going to look. And I don't know that I have an official answer on that quite yet. But I think in general, this is about the expectation that they had. I still think they're going to end up taking somewhere between, 10 to 15 guys out of the transfer portal. So still plenty of work to do, plenty of additions to be made. I do want to mention Trey Wilson really quick, because I think he's probably the name that most Baylor fans are kind of skeptical about him leaving, or maybe upset with him leaving, because he has played quite a bit over the last 2 years. But he's a guy who I just don't really believe fit their scheme anymore. He's not that big. I think he's around 265, 270. And they really need guys who have more size than that. I mean, you saw it with Trevin Maye this year, who he was like 290, 300 pounds playing that position. You saw, the other guys that they have with Samu coming in. And you just kind of look around and go, man, they're looking for bigger bodies and guys who can take on more blocks. And so I think it just didn't end up being a great fit for him. I think he truly needs to be a true defensive end. And I just don't think he was going to be given that opportunity at Baylor. And so it's unfortunate, because I do think he's a talented player who will go somewhere and play very well. But I think it kind of makes sense for both sides at this point, as Baylor's just kind of looking for a different kind of prospect along the defensive line. So long story short, Baylor's kind of right where they need to be. I think as far as attrition goes and guys they're bringing in, I think you're going to see more on both sides. Probably not a ton more attrition, but definitely more additions out of the portal as they kind of figure out the roster numbers.
So I guess before we move on from the portal, anything else of note in terms of things you want to mention as far as upcoming visitors, or just is it going to go quiet for a couple of weeks as we get into Christmas and the bowl game? Like, just kind of set the table for people for, here, I guess the rest of the month of December, these last 2 weeks.
So Baylor had 4 official visitors yesterday. They're going to have 2 more in today. And I feel like Baylor's in a pretty good spot with pretty much all of those guys. Keep in mind, Kobe Prentice was one of those visitors on Monday. So that's already one out of the group that has committed to Baylor. A bunch of other guys that are on these visits. I mean, a few notable ones. A Northwestern safety, Devin Turner. He was an all Big Ten honorable mention guy. He's like 6'1", 215, somewhere in there, 215, 220. Lots of production during his time at Northwestern, and really a guy who showed a lot of versatility of, he can play in the box, but he can also play field safety. He's done both during his career at Northwestern. And so I think he's kind of the guy on these visits that they need to find a way to land. He makes a lot of sense. It would be a head-to-head recruiting win over TCU and Missouri as well. So I think that's important to mention, because you want to go out and win these battles when you have those opportunities. I think Devin Turner fits really well with what they're trying to do defensively, and he went to Lone Star High School. So there's a little bit of a natural fit there with him coming back to Texas potentially. Outside of him, a few other names to mention: Louisville offensive lineman Joe Crocker and Texas Tech offensive lineman Ty Buchanan. They both visited. Joe Crocker's visiting today. Ty Buchanan visited yesterday. Both have good relationships with Mason Miller from his time at Mississippi State. Ty Buchanan started every game that he was healthy in for Texas Tech. He played a lot of snaps this year, played really well, played both right tackle and left tackle. I think the obvious assumption is that he would come in and start at right tackle for Baylor to make up for the loss of Campbell Barrington. I like him. I think he fits well. He's like 6'6", 310. Does a lot of similar things to Campbell Barrington. But if you remember Campbell Barrington from last year to this year, there was a big jump. And I think you could see that from Ty as well in Mason Miller's scheme and under Mason Miller's coaching. I think you could see that. As far as Crocker goes, again, another guy, great relationship with Mason Miller during his time at Mississippi State. He was at Louisville, hasn't played much, but he's got 3 years of eligibility. And so that's really intriguing to give them more depth. A guy that you feel like could probably play a little bit this year, but also is kind of a potential tackle of the future for Baylor's offensive line. So 2 really good offensive linemen. Texas State wide receiver Cole Wilson is visiting today. That's another big name. He was at Incarnate Word his freshman year. Was one of the best freshmen in all of the FCS that year. And then he transferred to Texas State. So he was playing with GJ there at Texas State and has played really well during his time in college. I mean, lots of production, lots of touchdowns, the ability to play in the slot or outside, which is going to be massive for him to come to Baylor with all this knowledge of the air raid scheme. We saw how well that worked out for a guy like Ashton Hawkins, a guy who's played in the scheme before, understands it, and can really fit into whatever Baylor needs. That's very important. I think Cole Wilson is one of those guys who does that. And would make a lot of sense with Kobe Prentice. And if they get those two, then all they really need at wide receiver is just a big outside receiver would be the kind of the last area that they address there. And then finally, the linebacker position. Fresno State linebacker Phoenix Jackson. He's about 6'6", 220. Had a very nice year at Fresno State. 49 tackles, 7 for loss, multiple sacks, 2 interceptions, a forced fumble. Guy that wrecked a lot of havoc during his time at Fresno State this year. Definitely an attacking linebacker, a guy who gets in the backfield, but also a guy who I think has the versatility to potentially play star, especially in running rush down situations. And so he's a guy that I'm keeping my eye on. That would be potentially a head-to-head win over Auburn. So another nice battle there for Baylor. And so I think that's everyone. I think that's the list right now of guys who have visited yesterday or today. Those are the targets for Baylor, the guys that would make a lot of sense, and the guys who, Baylor's obviously made priorities so far during this portal process. So to answer your question, I expect a lot more movement over the course of the next week.
Yeah, that's that time of year. Transfer portal keeps things busy, and the Bears are going to be very active. And we've talked about it before, but they learned from their mistakes a couple of years ago that really put them in a lurch when they won the Big 12 title and then didn't really turn around and capitalize off that momentum or attack the portal, kind of kept things status quo. And I think they admitted pretty quickly thereafter that was a mistake and kind of led to some of the struggles these past couple of years. They had to dig themselves out of a hole. So very fun and exciting to see with that lesson learned what they're going to do and how aggressive they're going to be. And you see them already off to a pretty quick start here with 3 pickups in less than these first 2 weeks that the portal's been open now. So Kobe Prentice of Alabama, the latest, and we've talked about him, but there will be plenty more. So stay closely tuned into Sikkim365.com to get all your transfer portal information needs and discussion and whatnot. So a lot already being talked about over there with Kobe Prentice here in these last 30 minutes or so. And there's a bit of a rundown on what's to come and what to look forward to as well. Meanwhile, the team itself is getting ready for the Texas Bowl, and they did drop a little surprise yesterday, a little uniform teaser as they go with a little bit of a different look for the game down in Houston, debuting the script Baylor helmets. This kind of becoming the latest trend that's been popular to see amongst college football teams this year. The script mascot spelled out or school name spelled out on the side. In this case for the Bears, it is Baylor across the side in green with white outline in script lettering on yellow helmets, and they will wear their white jerseys and green pants as you see the combination up on your screens right now. They dropped a little video and a little crossover promotion with Baylor men's basketball to, I guess, debut these. Sawyer Robertson involved in the video unveiling. So script lettering, like I mentioned, is something that's become popular over the last year or so. And you've seen teams debut these helmets. So Baylor breaking out a little something different for their bowl game. What are your thoughts?
I really like it, and I like how they promoted it as well, because we saw the initial video for basketball when they unveiled the scripted Baylor logo, and we saw the Langston Love video. He goes into the locker room and then puts on the jersey, and it was really cool when that happened. And then you see Sawyer and him. Now Sawyer gets the bag and goes and drives back to the football facility, and then just debuts this awesome helmet. Josh Cameron, obviously, with the gear on in this picture here. I think this looks awesome. Like, this is a great job by Baylor in general of promoting this. This is a great job by Baylor and kind of honestly listening to the fans, because fans really wanted this for football. I don't know if you remember that, but after the basketball jerseys came out, there was a lot of people like, oh, can we get that for football as well? It looks great on these helmets. I think this is going to be an awesome look for when they go to this bowl game. The only thing that I'm kind of just keeping my eye on is, LSU. I don't know what colors LSU are wearing for this game. I haven't really checked, but I'm curious if there's any clashing there because of the gold yellow type vibe.
Yeah, that's what I wondered as well. Is LSU? I don't know. Is wearing white helmets? I guess
Okay.
can be the only thing. No, I'm saying I don't know. I
No.
assume they're wearing white helmets. I think if they're wearing gold, it's kind of an odd choice to make. I like the script, and I think it's cool to just stay with the times. And that's been something that's been popular. Like I said, over the last year, you've seen a lot of programs go with the script writing in some form or fashion. So yeah, I saw the yellow, and I just assume LSU must be wearing something different, or it's just a kind of an interesting choice that you're also going to wear yellow helmets against a team that pretty much always wears yellow helmets. So yeah, I don't know what that's going to look like, but they'll be, I guess, wearing purple jerseys. We know that, right? Because Baylor will be in the white jerseys. So yeah, I guess maybe they could go, or they could go white helmets. Yeah,
Yeah.
probably what they do. But yeah, the yellow was an interesting choice because that's not always popular, and you're playing a team that wears yellow. So I was wondering the same thing as probably you and a lot of other people in regards to that. But we'll see what the Tigers debut. Haven't seen anything from their end, and it's been kind of interesting. The bowl game's still a few days away, so there's not been a ton of ramping up right now for it, with it being still a few days away. But I think people are excited. Saw LSU sold out their allotment of tickets, and there is some element of their fan base that's not super excited to be playing in this game because they just have grander aspirations, right? And would rather be in the playoff like everybody else. But we know it's an exciting game for Baylor and a great opportunity. So, kind of, what are your thoughts on the Texas Bowl as we draw closer? And this will be our last time talking about it because we're going to go off into the Christmas break and won't have another episode before the game. So, I guess your just general thoughts on this matchup and kind of what you're expecting and looking forward to here when the Texas Bowl finally rolls around to close out 2024.
It's a very exciting matchup, and we've mentioned that, since it was announced. I think this is great for Baylor's brand, great for the Big 12's brand. I think outside of Arizona State's, matchup in the college football playoff, I think this is probably the biggest one for the Big 12. And I think it's one that can go a long way towards inching the Big 12 closer to at least being they're not going to be the SEC, but give them at least a little more credit going forward than what we saw this year. I think it would go a long way. And Baylor's playing as good as any team in the Big 12. I think you could argue that right now they're the best team in the Big 12. I think you can make that argument. But I think in general, they're playing a really good LSU program, an LSU program that might not have everyone there, but no one cares about that. At least I don't care about that. LSU fans probably care about that, but I surely don't. I think this is a game that Baylor needs to go in there, take full advantage of the opportunity, and find a way to win it. And frankly, as good as LSU is talent-wise, they're not great. Like, defensively, they have holes, they have issues. They're going to give up yards to Baylor. They're probably going to give up points to Baylor. And then on the flip side, they got Garrett Nussmeier. So he's going to go out there and try to put up some yards and put up some points on Baylor. And I expect LSU to move the ball as well. So I think going into this game, I kind of expected to be a bit of a shootout. But ultimately, kind of how I see this playing out is LSU maybe wins a close game, or Baylor wins a close game, or I could see Baylor kind of pulling away in this one. That would not surprise me at all. I don't really see LSU blowing out Baylor. I'd be very shocked by that. I just think Baylor's playing too good for that to happen, and LSU's not really playing at that level. So that's kind of where I'm at going into this game. I think both teams have advantages on the offensive side. I just think Baylor has a few more answers on defense and a few more advantages offensively versus LSU's defense.
Yeah, I think the opt-out tracker has been interesting to see because not everybody is a big, meaningful, exit from the roster, as we see with Baylor. Not all these guys who are jumping the transfer portal are needle movers or big impact players. So you see a lot of guys jumping in for LSU. That doesn't mean they're all starters or anything along those lines. So I think maybe that part of it's a little bit overblown. But you look at it, and according to ESPN's matchup predictor, they've got LSU as nearly 60% favorites. The Vegas odds right now have it as just a 1 point game in favor of LSU right now. So I think everybody else expecting a close contest, and kind of what you said of very good chance Baylor can win this game, and also good chance LSU wins this game. I think it'll just come down to kind of who wants it more and who shows up more ready to play. And I don't think there's anything too much fancier than that. I don't really think there's a breakdown here, Grayson. Necessarily, it's the bowl game season, so it's kind of just anyone's guess as to what you're getting outside of the playoff. Honestly, right? I mean, it's who wants it more, who shows up, plays better, and it's not the same as like talking about a game in season where there's all these ramifications. It's kind of just like, I mean, like I saad, like who wants it more and shows up ready to play. And I think in the case of LSU, we kind of have this side eye of how much they want to be there and how ready to play will they be. Well, their fans are going to show up. It's a short distance, and they've sold out their allotment. I think Brian Kelly could definitely use a win, and to lose to Baylor would not be a good look for him, regardless of how you feel about bowl games. So I think from the Baylor perspective, I expect the team to show up and be ultra focused and ready to play. I don't really have any doubts for their motivations on that side of the coin.
I don't either. And I agree with you that, a lot of bowl games come down to, who wants it more, who's more prepared, who's more focused. All of those things really are amplified in bowl season. The college football playoff is obviously a different animal, but yeah, I think a lot of it will come down to that. I do think that, when you kind of look at, how these two teams finished the year, LSU won a couple games in a row at the end. Baylor won 6 in a row to end the season. I think there's at least a little bit of momentum on both sides. And I think when you kind of see that going into a bowl game, makes it a little more fun. Now, the hard part with LSU is it's just like what team is going to be out there, because since they are going to have guys who aren't playing in this game, it's kind of like you don't really know what the backup looks like. The backup could be better than the starter potentially, or is it just one of those areas that becomes a huge weak link? And I think those are kind of the questions that are hard to answer, frankly. They're hard to know. And so I think for Baylor, it's just important to play the way that they have played, do what they've done during this 6-game stretch, continue to run the football against a run defense that I don't really think is that great, continue to attack when you can through the air, continue to move the football efficiently, and score in the red zone. If they continue to do those things, I find it very hard to imagine that LSU is going to have a lot of answers for that.
Yeah, I mean, same here. I feel good about their chances, and I think it just comes down to, like I said, kind of exhausting to say it again in a way, but I just think it comes down to who shows up ready to play and plays the sharpest and does the little things. I don't think there's some kind of storyline to weave in and out. It's bowl season, so more than ever before, it's a crapshoot on just kind of what version you're getting, especially in these non-playoff games with opt-outs and different motivations and all of that. But I do think it's good to see that LSU is going to have their contingent of fans here. Haven't heard on the other end of the Baylor side of things, kind of what to expect in terms of turnout. But I would imagine that people are going to be, out there in good numbers because they've got a pretty good base down in Houston. And I think people seem to be pretty excited for the game in general, based on the folks that I've talked to and just kind of the vibes that I'm getting. So I think that's exciting, and should make for a really good game. I mean, are you looking for anything in particular here? Because I don't really feel the need to get into like the matchups and all that with the questions that are out there. We know they've got a really good quarterback. Who's going to be back next year in Garrett Nussmeier. Caden Durham's a really solid young running back from Duncanville. Obviously, NFL talent all over the place. But, I mean, outside of what we've said, do you have any other things to add on to LSU and Baylor in terms of the game itself?
I mean, they got 2 really good tackles, but I don't know that either of them are going to play in this game along
Right.
the
Yeah.
offensive line. They got 2 really good pass catching options when you look at Kyron Lacey and Mason Taylor, who's their tight end. And I don't know if either of them are going to play in this game. They already lost CJ Daniels, their other wide receiver, to the transfer portal. Their other guy who kind of came on late was Chris Hilton. So he's kind of their other receiving option if those guys don't play. So yeah, if those guys aren't playing, it's going to be very interesting to see kind of what they put together on the offensive side. You mentioned Caden Durham. Really like him as a player. I think he's going to be very good in the future. But the problem is LSU with 2 NFL tackles really weren't running the ball at an exceptionally high level. So it's hard to imagine that, now with 2 starters at tackle or 1 starter at tackle that, now they're going to put together the run game completely. Kind of find that hard to believe. So that's kind of where I'm at there. I think Garrett Nussmeier is a very good quarterback, very capable quarterback. And what we do know is even if guys sit out, LSU's got another 4-star guy that's backing them up. So he could be able to take advantage of that. Baylor's secondary has been a weakness this year. So we'll see, just how much he's able to take advantage of it. But that is an area that I'm definitely focused on when it comes to LSU on offense, especially because in the past, when Baylor's faced some of these, really good teams, I always flash back to that Georgia game in the Sugar Bowl where one NFL guy just took over that game, and it was George Pickens. And he just they couldn't stop him at all. If LSU has that performance from a guy like Kyron Lacey, it could cause some problems.
So the Bears riding in a 6-game win streak into this one on Tuesday, December 31st. So exactly 2 weeks from today. So it's kind of hard to get too in the weeds. One, because it's a bowl game, that's a non-playoff game. So again, it's just a wild card as far as who's going to be available. It's also 2 weeks away still. So we're going to take break, have a full Christmas, have full breakdown, and then still have some time to wait for this game here in a couple of weeks, but we will be out of pocket for the majority. So that's why we're talking about it a bit today. But yeah, obviously there's just a lot of questions because in this day and age, these bowl games, you just really don't know what you're going to get in terms of turnout, both in terms of fan support, but also the roster and who's available and who's in the portal and whatnot. We've seen that also create a mess for a few teams already. Like Penn State, who loses their backup quarterback right as they're about to go into the playoffs. So you just don't really know with the portal how all of it's going to work. But it looks like the Bears will be relatively unharmed. Haven't lost anybody that we've run down that's going to be a major impact player for LSU. It remains to be seen on what their totality looks like in terms of opt-outs by the time that rolls around. But they are going to take a little bit of a hit. It's just a matter of, how much their star power comes to play. But Nussmeier is going to play, and some others are expected to play, like a Kyron Lacey, I believe. So they'll still be plenty talented, if not more talented. And it'll come down again to who wants it more, who executes better, all the simple things. But you got to love the way that Baylor's rolling into it from a confidence standpoint, from a winning standpoint, from an identity standpoint. They seem geared up and ready to play in this game. Meanwhile, for LSU, did win a couple games to close the year after a 3-game losing streak where they lost in College Station to what was a top 15 Aggies team, turned around and got blown out by Alabama, and then lost to Florida down in the swamp, but were able to rebound and beat Vanderbilt in a close game, and then beat up on Oklahoma pretty good back at the end of November. So that's how they closed it out and launched themselves into the Texas Bowl, where, again, in 2 weeks, it'll be Baylor and LSU down in Houston for some hardware and for some fun. I saw the itinerary came out, and I'm not going to be down there, but much for the game itself, just because of the Christmas break and all of that. But for those folks who I guess are coming from out of town, they got 5 days of activities leading into this game. So even though it's not far from home, it's still a bowl trip. And so they're going to have their multiple media sessions and team events and all sorts of stuff. So I'm sure a lot of things will be trickling out from those kinds of events leading up to the game. So you can look forward to that as well. But yeah, Baylor LSU, I don't really have a whole lot other, to say on it other than kind of is what it is. And it's a good opportunity, and hopefully they take advantage of it and don't let a chance to go and beat LSU get away from them, because I think that'd be a really nice win. And you really just want to finish strong with as well as you've played down the stretch this season. So meanwhile, before we get into the mailbag, elsewhere around the world of Baylor athletics as we touch in before saying goodbye for Christmas break. You've got the Baylor men, Grayson, who, man, it's been a little bit of a rocky road here to start the season. Falling out of the top 25, I certainly didn't expect that, so soon into the year before 2024 was up. But after that loss to UConn, a couple of weeks ago now at this point, they turned around and they beat Abilene Christian a few days back. But most recently, nearly a week ago, now at this point, 94-69 winners over Norfolk State last Wednesday. That's the last time we saw the Bears in action. So they've been off for nearly a week, and they will be off for a while longer, another 10 days before they suit up against Arlington Baptist. So we're kind of here at a real full break in the schedule where they find themselves right now sitting at 7-3 overall with losses to number 6 Gonzaga and number 11 Tennessee and number 25 UConn, at least at the time that they played. And then depending on how you count top 25 wins, had the W's over St. John's and also Arkansas as well. So Arlington Baptist coming up a couple of days after Christmas over at Foster Pavilion. And then it will be just a few days later, the start of Big 12 play. So Utah up first on the docket on New Year's Eve when you will see the Bears get that Big 12 schedule underway. So just any thoughts on where the men find themselves at this moment?
Yeah, I mean, they're in an interesting spot. They're not getting very much respect from the national media, from, the people that vote on the AP poll. They should be ranked. I mean, the fact that they got blown out in those 2 games and were still inside the top 15, and then they lose a really close game on the road to UConn, who's now turned their season around. And then you drop outside of the top 25. It doesn't really make much sense to me. I think Baylor is a good basketball team that is still flawed at this point in the season, but they're definitely good enough to be inside that top 25. I don't quite understand that part of it, but this team needs to get better regardless of the poll. They have a nice opportunity to just kind of get right this next game or two, and then you head into that Utah game with a opportunity to make a statement immediately in Big 12 play, which they do need. They need to show up early and often in Big 12 play, get some wins, and really get themselves back into the form that, not even back into the form, get themselves into a form that I think we can actually envision this team making a deep run in the tournament. Because right now, it's kind of hard to imagine that.
Yeah, and it definitely maybe I think it was a little bit shocking that that's the way that it went down. But big time.
Sorry, guys, dealing with some technical difficulties here. We're trying to get Craig back on. But yeah, I mean, right now basketball just needs to take that step forward, right? And they need to find a way to, I think, it's not about salvaging the season. It's about just trying to figure out, who they are as a team, right? And trying to get back into a point where, people have faith in kind of who they can be going forward. We'll see on that. We'll see if they're able to get to that point. It feels like they're a little bit away from that. You're seeing the guards play a little bit better, but again, the competition has gone down. So how are they going to look against teams that are really good? Kind of been a mixed bag of either getting blown out or very close games like the ones against St. John's and, of course, against UConn. Outside of that, the Lady Bears, the women's basketball team, they're off for a while as well before gearing up for Big 12 play. The Big 12 side in women's basketball right now is pretty loaded as far as records go. But there's only 4 teams that are really inside that top 25, top 30-ish area when you look at KenPom and advanced metrics like that. And so because of that, Baylor doesn't look great because of the couple losses that they had. But if you look deeper, I think you can really figure out, who they really are. Right. I think this team is a top 5 team in this league. I think this is a top 5 team in general. And so I think for that reason, you can kind of see a path for them going forward to having a lot of success in Big 12 play. The Big 12 is, again, I don't think that strong. And so for that reason, I think they can have a lot of success once Big 12 play does get here. If you look at the bottom of the league, it's a lot of teams that aren't very good. And it's kind of interesting. The women's side and the men's side, there's a few teams in the Big 12, more than a few, honestly, who just played very weak schedules. So you have teams that are, 9-1 or something along those lines, but they're outside the top 70 in KenPom or top 70 in, advanced metrics. I find that fascinating. And that's kind of the dilemma, right? Do you schedule a bunch of cupcakes and then when you get into conference play, you're in shock? Or do you schedule a really tough schedule knowing that you might lose a couple times, you might get embarrassed once or twice, but it'll have you ready for Big 12 play. You're not going to see something you haven't seen before. I prefer that strategy. I think Scott Drew and Nikki Collin prefer that strategy as well. But there are some programs across the country that are more interested in just piling up wins. And so for that reason, it becomes one of those things where how good are these teams really? And I think that's an important question that people should have when they're kind of looking through and trying to figure out, what does this look like for women's basketball going forward? Hey, Craig. So Craig's back. Craig, we just talked a little bit about men's basketball and women's basketball. So whatever you want to get to next is perfect.
Yeah, so sorry for that. Everything just froze suddenly. That's what happens sometimes when we're on these remote connections, but good to be back with you. So hopefully didn't miss too much. And yeah, I think we should just get to the mailbag just to ensure that the connection stays as good as possibly can. But thank you for covering. I was trying to get to the women. I don't know how far I got into it, but I was trying to get to them. And so I'm glad you covered that. So yeah, now that I'm back, let's just go ahead and close this thing out with the mailbag and get off into the holidays here and start off with Doc Crowell. He's got a lot to ask today. Of all recruits the past 2 years where Baylor was heavily involved in their recruitment and lost in the end, if they entered the portal tomorrow, what one recruit would each of you want? So of all the recruits the past 2 years where Baylor was heavily involved and lost in the end, if they entered the portal tomorrow, what one recruit would you want? I have no idea because nobody even comes to mind as far as somebody they were a finalist for they missed out on. Dude, I'll be honest with you. It's like I move on. Like my mind's already flipped from guys that chose elsewhere in the transfer portal. So does anybody spring to mind for you immediately that would be an answer here?
I mean, Torian York at A&M is definitely one that comes to mind for me because he was one of those guys that, looking back on, I was very high on him. There were a lot of evaluators who did not think that his game was going to translate because he doesn't have a amazing athletic profile, but he's been awfully good at Texas A&M. So he's kind of one that really jumps off the page to me. I think, if you're looking deeper, I mean, Micah Hudson would have been cool and he entered the portal, but I wouldn't have called Baylor a finalist for him at the end. They were kind of on the outside looking in by the time he finished his recruitment. So I'll go with Torian York. I think that's a good one to go with. And he's also a local kid, which Baylor needs to find a way to land more of those local guys.
Yeah, it's a good choice. I don't even know who all you consider finalists for. I mean, that one, now that you mention it refreshes my memory a little bit, but outside of that, I don't recall too many other people off the top of my head. I have to dig into that, but he makes a lot of sense. Without naming names, have you heard of any projected 2025 starters at risk of entering the portal?
I have not. And if I did, I wouldn't be saying it on here, but I feel like Baylor's in a good spot to continue to build on what they had last year. I think Baylor's in a good spot to build off of kind of that group. And I think they've locked in pretty much all the starters. So I think that they're in a good spot there. There could be a surprise maybe, but I think right now they're from what I've heard, they're in a good spot.
They don't talk about person over player much after that was the tagline of a poor 2023 outing, but with how few players want to transfer and the way they talk about the staff, it seems like it is still an internal policy. Have they stopped being vocal about it because of the fan backlash, or are they still following the spirit of that message while not promoting it actively? Thank you, Doc Crowell, as always.
I think it's definitely promoting it internally because it is important. It is within the DNA of this program. But I think the way that it got spun after a poor recruiting class and after not using NIL sufficiently, I think they had to kind of reel it back in. You know what I mean? And had to go with something else. Obviously, the one that came to mind during last year was We Pay Players. So obviously a very different kind of pitch outward at least. But I think when they get guys on visits, person over player is still very important. They're not going to take a bunch of risks. They need guys to be really good people as well as, really good players and guys who fit within the culture of the program. They're not going to take a ton of risks on guys who might ruin that.
See, Bears always win 2 wide receivers or 3, and who is most likely at this moment?
So I still think the answer here is going to be 3, and I've felt that way for a while now. They already got Kobe Prentice. I think Cole Wilson makes a lot of sense, the Texas State wide receiver who's visiting today. I think they'll go out and try to find one more, probably a big outside receiver to make up for losing Ketron Jackson and Hal Presley. They're going to need another guy on the outside opposite Josh Cameron.
Dr. Pearson, PH, okay, Kobe Prentice supposedly ran a 4.3840 at the Bama summer camp under Saban. How would we uniquely utilize his speed and talent as a key feature in Spav's offense? And this was clearly written before today because it is hypothesizing on going to ask the question, what is the likelihood we snag him, likely for a big price tag? So they snagged him, Grayson. I don't know about the price tag, but what are the odds? The odds are pretty good there, Dr. Pierce. So, how will they uniquely utilize Kobe Prentice's speed and talent as a key feature? And any thoughts on the price tag?
So the price tag part, I don't think this was a situation where he was extremely expensive. I mean, he had produced at Bama, but he also hadn't produced at a super high level. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And he's just a 1-year guy for Baylor as well. As far as how he's going to fit, I mean, I think he's going to fit in the slot really well. And they've been trying to figure out how are they going to kind of replace what they had with Monterey Baldwin and Ashton Hawkins. And I think Kobe Prentice is kind of he's different, I think, than both of them. Faster straight line than Ashton Hawkins, not quite as fast as Monterey Baldwin in my eyes, but more of a complete receiver than Monterey. Monterey basically just had deep routes this year in this offense or really short routes that he created big plays off of. I think you're going to see Kobe Prentice used more across the middle of the field. You're going to see him used on deep routes. You're going to see him used on rail shots. You're going to see him used to get first downs. And then really they're going to try to get him in space so that he can create yak after he catches the football. I think he's going to be used a lot. I think he's going to be featured in a big way. And I think he's a very unique kind of guy because of his talent level. Now he just needs it all to be put together. And he needs, honestly, an offense that's going to feature him, which I think Baylor will.
All right, so Wyatt Smith's got a few questions here, so let's rattle through. How many commitments do we need to have this week for it to be labeled a successful week in the transfer portal?
Well, they got 1. I would probably say 4. I think 4 would be a successful week if you're talking before the weekend. I think they're going to have more guys in on the weekend, so it could get higher than that. But based on what we know now, at least 4, maybe even more. I mean, shoot, might as well land all of them. I think they have a good shot at landing all of them, but I'll go with that number for now.
Which player that has visited or scheduled to do so do you think would be the biggest difference maker for next season?
Okay, so only of the group that has visited so far. So I'm not going to talk about Samu or Matthew Fobs-White in regards to this question.
Well, it says which player that has visited or scheduled to.
Okay, so yeah, I guess I'm taking it as not committed, but if we're gonna go committed, it's Samu. If we're gonna go not committed, then I'm gonna go with Northwestern safety Devin Turner. Makes a lot of sense for a variety of reasons. I think he's a guy that really fits into that defense well. Has a ton of experience. Was an All Big Ten honorable mention this year. Can play field safety. Can play closer into the box, whether that's star or boundary. I think he's just so versatile, and that skill set is very needed in this defense. And Northwestern wasn't good this year, but Northwestern played really good defense, and he was a big part of that.
What does Baylor need to be improving in their own game this week to prepare for the bowl game?
Yeah, I think for them defensively, the secondary, however much you can improve over these stretch of games, whatever tweaks you can make to try to change up your scheme a little bit to make you more successful going into this LSU game. I think that's the area, the secondary. If their secondary plays really well, I can't see them losing that game to LSU.
Yeah, I don't think they have too many weak links, but that'd probably be one of them. And Nuss can throw it around a little bit, and they've got some talented wide receivers. So that definitely feels like the area where they could hurt you. I don't think you expect them they're just going to line up and Caden Durham's going to kill you or anything, barring some just unforeseen bad play. So you feel strong about that. I think you feel like you can score on these guys. So yeah, I think it comes down to how you defend the pass as much as anything else. And also, Wyatt says Baylor versus LSU, Sikkim 365 tailgate. What is your guess for final head count? As always, thank you. And thank you, Wyatt, as well. So, what do you think would be the head count for the tailgate for Sikkim 365 down in Houston?
For the Texas Bowl when Baylor played Vanderbilt in 2018, I don't know the exact numbers, but that head count felt like it got over 300. And so I think this one should get to that as well. This is a big time opponent, a big time matchup. LSU already sold out their ticket allotment. Baylor fans need to come right in and sell theirs out as well. They need to match that. And as far as Sikkim 365 goes, I think there's a lot of renewed optimism on our site. So therefore, I think there's going to be a lot of people at the tailgate. So I'll go with 300.
DJSA, what do you think is the right timing for the portal? Can the Pribula situation at Penn State be avoided, or does the playoff timing make this inevitable? And talking about Penn State's backup quarterback, who, even though they're in the playoff, they because of the transfer portal overlap with guys jumping in the portal. And as a quarterback who wants to play, he wants the right opportunity and the best opportunity. So rather than playing with Penn State through the playoff, he is jumping into the portal and will not be with them as they get underway. And that's been a big to do over the last 24 hours or so. You can certainly see it from his standpoint as a player. He's got to do what's best for himself. You can see it from the team standpoint of why that sucks. But it's all college football's fault. I mean, that's the main thing is they've created all these messes. The transfer, all these things were entirely avoidable, but they sat and they stayed as greedy as they possibly could until courts finally forced them to make changes. And now they're trying to corral what they can, and it's led to messy timelines and dumb schedules and just a lot of stupid stuff. And that includes a guy having to opt out from playing in playoff games potentially because he's got to go get himself a portal spot, Grayson. Now, in theory, he's got an extension as a playoff team, so he could be fine, but I guess he feels like he's got to jump on the bus while there's still plenty of seats available, basically. And that's understandable to an extent as well. I think the whole situation kind of sucks. So you just have to hope Drew Aller stays healthy if you're a Penn State fan. But what are your thoughts on, I guess, the timing for the portal and if it could be any better or not?
Yeah, the portal timing is not great right now. And we know that, but it's also pretty much unavoidable because what are you going to do? Push it back until late December, but the playoffs are still going on. So someone's still going to be unhappy. And you can't push it all the way into mid January because schools want guys to enroll in January. The next semester starts by then. So there really isn't a great solution to this. I'm fine with the way they have it. I know that stinks for Penn State, but in general, that's why you got to have depth. And also on the flip side of that, guys need to find spots. And right now is the opportunity where you can actually find a spot where you can go be a starting quarterback and where, teams really need you. And I understand it from the, whole staying with Penn State thing and trying to win a college football playoff. But, also this guy's got to do what's best for him as well. Right. And so I think it's kind of unavoidable right now. It is what it is. And that's what makes college football so up in the air right now and so wild at times because they just haven't really figured out the perfect strategy for anything. They're trying, but it's not, kind of across the landscape of college football. It's just not quite there.
Yeah, anytime you hear people being and moaning about the state of college football, blame leadership first. It's entirely their fault. They created this situation by sitting on their hands, knowing that this was coming at some point. Chickens were going to come home to roost, but they stayed as greedy as they possibly could until they were forced to share some of their money. And now it's led to all of these chaotic timelines and forced decisions. And could have solved all this by just being ahead of the curve, but they didn't want to do that until they were forced to. And so now I'm not going to sit there and listen to them cry about the milk that they spilled everywhere, right? So it is what it is. And you feel for the players in some cases. I feel for the fans, though, most of all right now, because there's some cool stuff happening, but there's still a lot of dumb messiness with this sport that you wonder how it alienates people eventually. I mean, I don't think it's not going to be a popular sport by any means. It's still plenty popular, but I do wonder just gradually like how much you just eventually wear people down with just silliness that they're like, all right, this is dumb. I'm just going to watch the NFL when they got salary caps and, drafts and like things at least make sense. The brand of football is not always the best, even though it's the best players in the world. But what it is missing from college, it makes up for, and just it's guardrails and the things that you wish college had in a lot of cases. But anyways, yeah, nothing they can do about it right now, Burks. It's the way it's going to be until I don't know. There's a better solution figured out. Scotty B, the Baylor King. Do you think Kyron Lacy plays for LSU in the bowl game? If he doesn't, it would be massive. I know Mason Taylor, their best tight end, declared for the draft, but didn't say opting out of the bowl game. So I haven't seen any updates on those guys. Any thoughts, or have you seen anything on either one of those players?
I haven't seen an update yet, but if either of them doesn't play, that definitely helps Baylor because it limits LSU's pass attack in some way. Both those guys are NFL guys in my eyes.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything, but if they did not play, that would be significant and would definitely be advantageous for the Bears. Those are two of their very best players. Let's see, Red Bear 07, looking towards 2025. How many players currently on the roster might jump into the portal if they don't break the two deep after spring ball?
I mean, again, I don't like speculating on, specifics, but I think they could probably lose, somewhere. I don't, usually post spring attrition's not massive. So maybe a few guys, but I don't expect there to be a lot. Usually there's not a ton of guys that leave after spring ball. I think it's more at specific programs. But for Baylor's case, I mean, they've done a great job at keeping guys. And so I kind of expect them to continue to do that. Maybe they'll lose a couple, but I don't think they're going to lose a bunch.
Yeah, it's hard to say this far out, but I think it probably in line with what sort of has been the average, which is maybe a handful of guys. But yes, it's hard to say right now and really know for sure. I did see. I'm just trying to look for some Kyron Lacy updates and Mason Taylor updates. I don't see anything on those guys anywhere, but I do see from a few days ago. I don't think we mentioned this specifically, but Will Campbell, their left tackle, is not going to play as he gets ready for the draft. So that's one major notable name that won't be playing for LSU. But yeah, no idea on their actual skill guys. So to be determined. They still got a couple weeks to figure all that out, actually. I mean, I'm sure they know by now, but a couple weeks still to go before that game. So I'm sure we'll hear more on those decisions. All right. And I think one more to go here. Useless Kim Degree. What is the transfer portal prospects' impression of Baylor at the moment? Do high-profile players see Baylor's position as a flash in the pan? Great spot to be, afterthought, etc. Maybe I'm biased, but I don't see why wide receivers, linebackers, or DBs wouldn't be jumping at a chance to join a conference contender next year.
I mean, I think you're seeing that. I think you're seeing that with the guys that they're landing. I mean, I think people just get caught in with the immediacy of everything and really trying to make things, wanting things to happen so quickly that you kind of get caught up in basically just saying to yourself that means Baylor missed out on all the guys that they like. And that's not what happened. Baylor's just been patient with this process. They've gotten the guys that they feel good about getting on campus. They've gotten the guys that fit within their NIL budget as well, right? It's all, you kind of got to figure it all out, right? Because if you spend a ton of money on one guy, or if you spend a ton of money on a guy who you like, then that also is a trickle-down effect on what guys you can actually compete for, right? And actually get. And so I think Baylor's just kind of managing that. And I think they've done a great job with it so far. They just got a wide receiver committed. I feel good that they could have another one committed soon. I think they're in a good spot there going forward. I think recruits, transfer portal guys view Baylor as an ascending program, a program with a lot of momentum, also a program that has some open spots available to come in and play immediately and have an impact. I think recruits see the offense as something that's going to be really good next year and really positive, which I think is going to bode really well for them as far as landing wide receiver talent. So I think they're in a great spot. I think transfer portal prospects see that. I think we're seeing that surge right now, and I think we're going to continue to see that surge. So yeah, I think they like Baylor. Do I think that Baylor is going to compete with, Ole Miss or Alabama or LSU or those type of schools for transfer portal guys every time? No, but I think they're going to win a lot of battles, and winning battles over guys like, TCU or Auburn or, other schools like that. That's a great place to be.
So yeah, I think they're in a good spot as far as their perception goes. I think you're seeing them get off to a nice start, and not bad to see Kobe Prentice jump into the fray as we got started today. So 3 transfer additions so far, and Matthew Fobs-White from uh, a couple days ago, I guess that was now at this point. Now Kobe Prentice today. Um, not bad at all. So I think they've got plenty of momentum and the potential for even more to really ramp this thing up and make it a pretty fun off season. So I think they're in a good spot as far as perception goes right now. Got the script helmets, got the bowl game in a couple weeks. I guess Grayson, let's close this out as we will head into a little bit of the dark ages for a couple of weeks with Christmas break. Nothing next week whatsoever. And then the following week, I guess, yeah, we'll have just the bowl game there in the middle of the week. But your thoughts on LSU, the game, and I guess just the rest of this year of 2024 as we kind of put a bow on everything and bid everybody adieu until next year.
It's a fun time. I think Baylor's built a lot of momentum here, recruiting, and with the bowl game coming up, going to be a fun matchup in Houston against LSU. I encourage all Baylor fans to try to get there if you can. Go support the team. They've done an amazing job this year, and I think it's only right that we go and support them and that everyone gets down there and really cheers on this team and this program. Other than that, though, I just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays. And I hope everyone is safe. I hope they all enjoy time with friends and family. And I hope you all just have a nice, relaxing time before the bowl game. And then, of course, show up for the bowl game. It's New Year's Eve. It's going to be a lot of fun down there in Houston.
Yeah, do you have any kind of a prediction? I mean, it's a bowl game, so it's just it's a total crapshoot. But any feel for this game?
Yeah, I'm going to take Baylor to win this one. I'm going to take the Bears in a, I don't want to say a blowout, so I'll probably go with something like 34-27. I think they win by a touchdown.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take Baylor as well. I mean, nothing concrete like feeling wise or anything here. I just think they're a bit more motivated, a bit more complete, and just a bit more into this opportunity than maybe LSU is. And maybe I'm entirely wrong on that. I think they'll have to play really well and give it their best shot, regardless of who shows up for LSU or not. But I think they'll do that because I think they understand that. I think this is a smart team that gets it, and I'd expect them to understand how important it is to try and make it 7 straight wins down the stretch to close out the season and to beat LSU, regardless of which version of LSU we see at 95% or 82% or whatever it is. To beat LSU and have that in the record books, 7 straight wins, all that would be a big deal. So I think this team understands that, and they've dealt well with expectations, especially as that streak kept building up. And, there was more every week on like, well, now this is up for grabs. Like they handled that well, whereas last year's team would have just thrown up all over themselves 2 years ago. The second half thrown up all over themselves with expectations. This team's really embraced that, and it's been pretty fun to see that. So, yeah, I think they'll embrace this as well. I'd pick Baylor in a competitive game, but nothing super detailed beyond that. And I expect it to be a fun time for everybody there in attendance. So hopefully see some of y'all down there, and hopefully it's a good turnout. It should be down in Houston. But until then, yeah, we'll be gone for a couple of weeks. So hope everybody has a very happy holidays and gets to spend good quality time with loved ones and travel safe. Everybody out there that'll be moving around the state or around the country or whatever your plans are, be smart, be safe, and hopefully just have a very happy holidays from everybody here at Sikkim 365. We appreciate all your support throughout the year, and appreciate you for listening as always. So that'll do it for I think pretty much 2024. We'll see if we sneak on before then, but just about. So, yeah, we'll see you on the flip side. And thanks everybody for riding along all year as we are here at the tail end. But one more game to go. Texas Bowl, Baylor and LSU, but plenty of transfer portal stuff to talk about over on Sikkim365.com as well. So spread the word, tell a friend, and enjoy Christmas, New Year's, and the rest of the holiday season. Until next time, for Grayson Grundhoefer and for Garrett Ross, I'm Craig Smoak, and this has been the Bearcast on Sikkim365.com.